From impeachments to inaugurations, if it's a political story, we are on the scene. The race for the White House is heating up.
We're beating Biden.
How dare he say that?
If it's breaking news, we're live with the latest coverage. From the White House, the State Department, and Capitol Hill, we know the issues, but above all, we know the players to bring you the latest in-depth analysis on all the key stories that we're covering. I'm Eric Ham. Join me from Washington here on Firstpost America. Hello and welcome to Firstpost America. I'm Eric Ham, coming to you live from the nation's capital in Washington, D.C. And over the next few minutes, we'll take you from the United States and around the world, covering all the top stories of the day. But before that, let's take a look at the latest headlines. China suspends nuclear talks with the United States in protest against weapons sales to Taiwan. Beijing accuses Washington of fueling tensions after approving arms worth over $500 million for the self-governed island. Germany plans to reduce its military aid for Ukraine from $9 billion to $4.5 billion starting next year. Germany is Ukraine's second biggest military donor after the United States. An Italian court fines a journalist over $5,000 for making fun of Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni's height. Meloni took legal action against the journalist after calling it body shaming. Authorities arrest the security chief for Venezuelan opposition candidate Maria Corina Machado with less than 2 weeks left until the July 28th presidential election. President Nicolas Maduro's office declines to comment on the arrest. And flash floods submerge hundreds of homes after heavy rain triggers a dam failure in Nashville, Illinois. Authorities begin mass evacuations after a second dam also reportedly collapses. We begin right here in the United States. The third night of the Republican National Convention mostly focused on Donald Trump's running mate, JD Vance. The Ohio senator was welcomed on the stage by his friend Donald Trump Jr. and introduced by his wife, Usher Vance.
When I was asked to introduce my husband, JD Vance, to all of you, I was at a loss. What could I say that hasn't already been said before? After all, the man was already the subject of a Ron Howard movie. Raised by his grandmother through tough times, chosen to help lead our country through some of its greatest challenges. I am grateful to all of you for the trust you have placed in him and in our family. And with that, it is my great privilege to introduce my husband and the next Vice President of the United States, JD Vance.
Addressing delegates at the RNC, Vance formally accepted the vice presidential nomination and offered a populist-themed message, presenting the Republican Party as a champion of working-class Americans while denouncing the Democratic Party as ineffective and out of touch.
From Iraq to Afghanistan, from the financial crisis to the Great Recession, from open borders to stagnating wages, the people who govern this country have failed and failed again. President Trump represents America's last best hope to restore what, if lost, may never be found again. A country where a working-class boy born far from the halls of power can stand on this stage as the next Vice President of the United States of America.
The 39-year-old nominee also joined scores of Republicans to condemn the assassination attempt against Donald Trump just 5 days ago.
I want all Americans to go and watch the video of a would-be assassin coming a quarter of an inch from taking his life. Consider the lies they told you about Donald Trump, and then look at that photo of him, defiant, fist in the air, when Donald Trump rose to his feet in that Pennsylvania field. All of America stood with him.
The GOP convention also invited the families of the 13 U.S. service members who were killed in a suicide bombing in August of 2021 during the evacuation of U.S. forces in Afghanistan. The parents and loved ones of the slain service members made a scathing critique of President Joe Biden, who enraged them last month after claiming that no service personnel died during his term in office.
I'm Christy Shamblin. My daughter-in-law, Sergeant Nicole Leanne G. was a United States Marine, and she was killed at Abbey Gate in Afghanistan, alongside 12 of her brothers and sister-in-arms. While Joe Biden has refused to recognize their sacrifice, Donald Trump spent 6 hours in Bedminster with us. He allowed us to grieve. He allowed us to remember our heroes.
When Hunter and the other service members' bodies were returned to the U.S. in Dover, Delaware, Joe Biden met the plane. But he made the occasion more about his son, lost to cancer, than our sons and daughters, lost on his watch. Worse than that, he has never said their names out loud. And during last month's debate, he claimed no service members have died during his administration.
Meanwhile, Donald Trump has long demonized immigrants, mocked the LGBT community, and has also been accused by at least 26 women of sexual misconduct since the 1970s. But he's now turned to the women in his life to help him soften those edges. His daughter-in-law, Laura Trump, addressed the RNC on Tuesday and portrayed the former president as a family man and a supporting father-in-law. Also, the former president's granddaughter, Kai Trump, made her convention debut last night and called Donald Trump just a normal grandpa.
I'm speaking today to share the side of my grandpa that people don't often see. To me, he's just a normal grandpa. He gives us candy and soda when our parents aren't looking. He always wants to know how we're doing in school. When I made the high honor roll, he printed it out to show his friends how proud he was of me. And he calls me during the middle of the school day to ask how my golf game is going and tells me all about his. On Saturday, I was shocked when I heard that he has been shot, and I just wanted to know if he was okay. It was heartbreaking that someone would do that to another person. A lot of people have put my grandpa through hell, and he's still standing. Grandpa, you are such an inspiration, and I love you.
Donald Trump's former doctor also attended the GOP convention and had a lot to say about President Biden's health. However, he remained silent regarding the health of Donald Trump. Notably, Donald Trump is 78 years old, just a few months older than President Biden was when he accepted the presidential nomination in 2020. Still, all eyes will be on the ex-president as he takes the stage tonight and formally accepts the party's nomination. This will be his first public speech since the assassination attempt less than a week ago. And of course, many are wondering just how the former reality television star will respond. And staying in the United States, President Joe Biden has tested positive for COVID-19 for the third time and is currently experiencing mild symptoms. Following this latest diagnosis, the commander-in-chief is isolating himself at his Delaware home. This health concern comes at a critical time with ongoing questions about his age and ability to serve as the nation's leader. However, the 81-year-old president has promised to recover and get back on the campaign trail in the lead-up to the Democratic National Convention, which is just a month away. Here's our report with more.
U.S. President Joe Biden was slated to speak at the UNIDO's annual conference when, right before his appearance, an announcement was made.
Regrettably, I was just on the phone with President Biden, and he shared his deep disappointment at not being able to join us this afternoon. The president has been at many events, as we all know, and he just tested positive for COVID.
Not once or twice, but this is the third time that Biden has tested positive for COVID-19. Even though the 81-year-old has been diagnosed with mild symptoms, it comes at a time when he's losing support not only within his party, but equally among voters.
I think that COVID is not the concern right now. The concern is having a leader that is going to take America in the right direction. And that leader is Trump.
But despite this, the US president remains optimistic. Flashing a thumbs up and assuring people that he felt fine, Biden headed to his Delaware beach home to isolate himself. And as he boarded the Air Force One, he was heard saying, "Good, I feel good."
Mr. President, how do you feel? How do you feel?
The campaign trip to Las Vegas was not the trip President Biden had imagined. The president first made a pit stop at a Mexican restaurant where he greeted several diners and posed for pictures with them. But shortly after that, Biden told his doctors that he had a runny nose and a cough, along with general malaise. Biden was then tested for COVID-19 and his results came back positive. Taking to X, Biden expressed gratitude for the well wishes, stating he would continue working during his isolation period. But with November around the corner, his diagnosis comes at a critical time for the re-election campaign. Biden, who has been garnering criticism for performing poorly in the first debate against Donald Trump, is leaving no stone unturned to prove himself, even though calls within the party are growing about his health.
We were really excited to see him, but I don't think it really speaks to his commitment or anything like that. Sounds like he's just affected by things that we're all dealing with. So I don't think that in itself is a sign that he should step down.
Before his COVID diagnosis announcement, President Biden suffered another blow when a prominent Democratic member of the U.S. House of Representatives, Adam Schiff, said it was time for Biden to pass the torch to someone else. Meanwhile, Donald Trump continues to garner support after surviving the assassination attempt. Heavyweight Republicans Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis have also offered full-throated endorsements of Trump's candidacy as a display of unity.
I'll start by making one thing perfectly clear. Donald Trump has my strong endorsement, period. If we have 4 more years of Biden, or a single day of Harris, our country will be badly worse off. For the sake of our nation, we have to go with Donald Trump.
Enemies do not confine their designs to between 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. We need a commander-in-chief who can lead 24 hours a day and 7 days a week. America cannot afford 4 more years of a weekend at Bernie's presidency.
Nearly 2/3 of Democrats want President Biden to step aside. Even though the president hoped to reverse those perceptions over a 3-day trip to Nevada, testing positive for COVID-19 quickly derailed those chances. So as he continues to recover in isolation, the question of his political future looms larger than ever.
And now shifting focus to the Middle East, political pressure continues to mount on Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu as the war in Gaza drags on. Opposition leader Yair Lapid has called out Prime Minister Netanyahu for failing to secure a hostage release deal with Hamas. During a speech in the parliament, Lapid criticized the Prime Minister's handling of the Gaza war and called him a coward and a failure. The opposition leader also urged Prime Minister Netanyahu to accept a hostage release deal next week when he visits Washington on the 24th of July.
Are you going to announce next week in your speech in Congress that you agree to the hostage deal? Are you going to stand on stage in Congress and say, I agree to the hostage deal, we are bringing home our children, our girls? If that is what you're going to say, and that's what you should say, And that's what the whole world expects you to say. Then go in peace. Come back in peace. Our blessing is with you. If you don't do it, don't go to Washington.
Lapid challenged Prime Minister Netanyahu to bring back the hostages or resign from office and allow for a more capable leader to take charge.
And if it's so difficult and sad for you, you are welcome to resign. The absolute majority of Israeli citizens will be very happy. Thank you.
Now, in response, Prime Minister Netanyahu said that he had no plans of slowing down the military offensive and claimed that Hamas would only compromise under pressure.
We are making systemic progress in achieving the war goals, freeing hostages, eliminating Hamas, and ensuring Gaza will not be able to pose another threat to Israel. We are achieving these goals thanks to combining military pressure and political pressure. And I can tell you unambiguously that Hamas is indeed under pressure.
Meanwhile, thousands of Israelis protested against Prime Minister Netanyahu and his war policies. Families of hostages also urged the Prime Minister to accept a deal with Hamas before his trip to Washington next week.
And we are calling for the Prime Minister to seal this deal. The Defense Minister and all the security services telling us this is the right moment to close this deal. If we won't close it now, we cannot do it anymore. We cannot take them back alive, and we must do it now for the future of this country, for the future of this community.
Prime Minister Netanyahu says his primary focus remains on defeating Hamas as he rejects calls for an independent inquiry into the security failures that led to the terror attack by Hamas on October 7th of last year. Now, the call for the independent inquiry into the security lapse was initiated by Prime Minister Netanyahu's Defense Minister Yoav Gallant. Minister Gallant has demanded accountability from all forms of government, including the military and the Prime Minister's office for the October 7th attacks. The pressure grows and the stakes are high as the Prime Minister attempts a consequential balancing act as he prepares for his visit to Washington while also warding off calls for his resignation at home. And moving to Latin America and El Salvador, over 3,000 children have been locked up in prisons over the past 2 years, with many facing abuse while in custody. This is according to the latest report by the New York-based Human Rights Watch, or HRW. In March 2022, El Salvador's President Nayib Bukele announced a state of emergency and launched a mass arrest campaign to get rid of gangs from the once crime-ridden country. He also set up a mega prison that holds up to 40,000 people, with each cell having space for 65 to 70 prisoners. Now, the HRW report says that the police arrested more than 3,000 minors in raids, often targeting those from low-income neighborhoods. However, many of the arrested children had no apparent connection to gangs, and they were reportedly targeted based on their socioeconomic background and physical appearance.
They said I was only going to be detained for one night. But since we left, the sergeant who detained me started threatening me. They didn't kill me because they had caught me in my house. He said that if I had been detained in the street or at the coconut farm, they would have killed me. He was threatening me. He said, "We'll do everything so this insect rots in there. You'll rot in jail."
The report goes on to say that at least 66 children were beaten and tortured while in custody.
Through our rigorous methodology, Human Rights Watch was able to corroborate at least 66 cases of minors who suffered human rights violations under the state of emergency. I want to say clearly that under the measures taken by the government in the state of emergency, at least arbitrary detentions and other serious violations of due process have been committed against children and teenagers in El Salvador. Tortures, mistreatment, and other degrading and inhuman or degrading treatments, and police harassment after they were released.
Now, some of these minors also faced overcrowding, poor food and health care, and no contact with their families or lawyers.
6 people, even up to 9, lived in a cell of 3 by 3 meters. We had limited water and food. We were only given 6 ounces of rice, little food.
un poquito que
The report also accuses authorities of leaving some children to be preyed upon by adult detainees who allegedly mistreated and sexually assaulted them. According to the HRW, more than 1,000 of the arrested children have already been convicted, with their prison sentences ranging from 2 to 12 years. And in many cases, these children were allegedly forced to give false confessions of gang affiliation.
The rate of cases taken by public defendants in El Salvador is incredibly high. In the case of children, each defendant has at least 108 cases they have to handle. This drastically reduces the access to a proper defense. That is in the cases where they have access to a defense, because in many of the cases we have documented, they don't have a possibility to see their lawyers before the audiences. There are restrictions to contact with family members. We documented cases where children did not have any possibilities to contact their families for weeks and even months.
Now, since President Bukele began his crackdown on gangs, some 80,000 people have been arrested. Before the anti-gang operation, El Salvador was called the murder capital of the world, with 107 homicides per 100,000 people. However, the number has reduced dramatically in just 2 years. By locking up more than 1% of the population, Bukele has turned El Salvador into one of the safest countries in Latin America, with the homicide rate falling to 2.4 per 100,000 people. And now, despite reports of human rights abuses committed inside and outside the prisons, President Bukele remains the most popular leader in the region because of his anti-gang campaign. And finally, a tale of luxury gone awry. A seller in Saudi Arabia is marketing a pair of flip-flops for nearly $1,200, and the internet has lost its mind over the pricing. People in India are claiming that the footwear barely costs $4. Our final report gets you all the details about this high fashion and low logic saga.
Ever noticed how a brand's name stamped on a common item suddenly makes it shine like a shooting star? It's as if the fairy godmother of retail waved her wand and poof, your everyday commodity transforms into a must-have luxury good. The magic ingredients? A brand's reputation, history, and exclusivity. In the cutthroat world of luxury, brands are on a relentless quest to outshine each other with products that scream exclusivity. Like Porsche's iconic sports cars, Louis Vuitton's timeless leather goods, and Hermès' legendary Birkin and Kelly bags. These brands have mastered the art of making customers drool over their new offerings, even if it means taking out a second mortgage. But sometimes luxury brands push the envelope to the point where people are left scratching their heads, simply wondering if the plot has been lost entirely. The case in point is a luxury item seller in Saudi Arabia. They have set social media ablaze with a pair of flip-flops, priced at a whopping $1,200. Yes, you heard that right. Flip-flops worth hundreds of dollars. These aren't just any flip-flops. They come with a simple white base and blue straps, encased in a glass box as if it were jewelry. The seller even demonstrates their flexibility and the rainbow of colors available. So why is the internet in a frenzy over these pricey slip-ons? In India, these exact slippers are practically seen in every household. They sell for just $4, and if a buyer has good bargaining skills, then they probably buy them for even lesser. In India, these iconic white and blue flip-flops have two primary uses. First, being worn in the washroom, and then, of course, being wielded by mothers as disciplinary tools. Yes, they are the original dual-purpose footwear. Once the video of these Indian slippers in their high-priced glory went viral, social media erupted in a meme fest. One user quipped, "This is the cheapest pair of slippers in Asia," while another suggested it might be a brilliant marketing strategy. Some even pondered the potential for a new business venture for Indians abroad. Of course, this isn't the first time that something like this has happened. Luxury brands have tried selling everyday items at exorbitant prices to their customers. Remember when Balenciaga launched a trash pouch for $1,700? or Gucci's distressed stockings for nearly $200. And who could forget Italy's Bottega and their $2,000 telephone cord necklace? The list is endless. But thankfully, the customers are not mindless. Luxury brands will continue to test the willingness of their customers to pay top dollar for seemingly mundane items. We can still laugh, roll our eyes, and maybe even hurl a slipper or two, metaphorically. After all, the comedy of luxury is a show that never seems to end.
That's our show for today. We certainly thank you so much for tuning in. We hope to see you right back here again tomorrow. Thanks again for watching. From impeachments to inaugurations, if it's a political story, we are on the scene. The race for the White House is heating up.
We're beating Biden.
How dare he say that?
If it's breaking news, we're live with the latest coverage. From the White House, the State Department, and Capitol Hill, we know the issues, but above all, we know the players to bring you the latest in-depth analysis on all the key stories that we're covering. I'm Eric Ham. Join me from Washington here on First Post America.
U.S. President Joe Biden has tested positive for COVID-19. The White House says he has shown mild symptoms. Biden has returned to the U.S. state of Delaware for self-isolation. He will